You think you know what a monster looks like? You picture claws, fangs, something lurking in the dark? But you're wrong. The worst monsters, the ones that truly haunt you, they look just like everyone else. They wear fine suits, they smile, and they shake your hand. And sometimes they own half the territory. My name is Tom Halbrook. I used to be a U.S. Marshal. For 20 years, I chased down the worst men this country had to offer. But those days were over. I'd buried my wife, buried my daughter, and buried my badge along with them. All I wanted was to be left alone on my 100 acres of Montana dirt, watching the sun rise and set until my time was up. But monsters don't care about what you want. It was late summer, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer. I was fixing a fence line when I saw it. A shape, stumbling out of the tree line. Too small for a man, too clumsy for a deer. I grabbed the rifle I always kept nearby. You don't get to my age in this line of work by being careless. As I got closer, I saw it was a girl, barely 19 maybe. Her dress was in tatters, her feet were bloody, and her face was a road map of another man's fury. She collapsed right there, at the edge of my property, like a puppet with its strings cut. I knelt beside her, my rifle still ready. Old habits. "Ma'am," I said, "can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. They were a shocking, brilliant blue, filled with a terror so profound it felt like I could touch it. She whispered one word, a name, Whitmore. And just like that, I knew my peace was over. Because in this part of Montana, that name meant only one man. Colonel Ezekiel Earl Whitmore, the man who owned the county, the law, and every soul unlucky enough to cross his path. She hadn't just been running from a man, she'd been running from a king, and she'd run straight into my kingdom. You have to understand, I wasn't a hero. Not anymore. The war at Gettysburg and the years spent hunting men had scraped all that polish off me. I was just an old man with too many ghosts. My wife Sarah and my daughter Emma were taken by fever 6 years back. After that, the badge on my chest felt more like a tombstone. So I bought this ranch, this patch of quiet, to wait out the clock. This girl lying broken in my dirt was the same age Emma would have been. That thought settled it. Some things a man just can't walk away from. I lifted her into my arms. She weighed next to nothing. "What's your name?" I asked. "Clara," she whispered against my shoulder, and then she passed out. As I carried her toward my house, the house I'd built for a family I no longer had, I felt it. The cold dread that comes before a storm. The kind of storm that doesn't just knock down trees but tears up the very ground you stand on. This wasn't just trouble. This was the end of the world as I knew it. Back at the house, I tended to her wounds. It was worse than I thought. The bruises weren't fresh. They were layered, a cruel tapestry of old and new pain. There were marks on her throat, finger-shaped. I'd seen bodies in back alleys with less violence done to them. An old, familiar anger started to burn in my chest. An anger I thought I'd buried with my badge. She drifted in and out of consciousness. In a moment of clarity, her eyes focused on me. "He'll find me," she whispered. "He always finds me." "Who is he to you?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. "He calls me his wife," she said, and the way she said the word wife made it sound like a curse. "My father owed him money, a gambling debt, so he took me as payment." My jaw tightened so hard I heard it click. A man selling his own daughter, and a man who would buy her. The world was full of filth, and I'd spent my life wading through it. I thought I was done, but the filth had washed up on my doorstep. "You're safe here," I told her, and I don't know who I was trying to convince more, her or me. She just shook her head, her blue eyes wide with a terror that went beyond the bruises. "You don't understand. He's not just a rancher. He has men, loyal men, and he's killed before. I've seen it." A cold chill ran down my spine, a feeling I hadn't had since the war. "Who?" I asked. "Who did you see him kill?" "Moses," she breathed the name. "He worked in the stables. He was kind. He snuck me food after Earl locked me in my room for 3 days. Earl caught him." Her voice broke. "He beat him to death, right in the yard. He made everyone watch." The image she painted was stark and brutal. This wasn't just a powerful man with a temper. This was a tyrant, a man who made examples of people. And then she said the words that changed everything. "It's not just the ranch," she whispered, leaning closer, as if the walls themselves were listening. "He has meetings, secret meetings with powerful men from back east. They talk about restoring the natural order, about taking back what the North stole." It was then I knew. This wasn't about a runaway girl. It wasn't about an abusive husband. This was something bigger, something rotten that had taken root in the heart of the country and was spreading, unseen, in the shadows. As if on cue, I saw it through the window, a distant glow on the horizon, torches, a long fiery serpent winding its way through the darkness, coming straight for my ranch. They hadn't even waited for morning. My quiet life hadn't just ended. It was about to be burned to the ground. The torches grew closer, a pack of wolves smelling blood. I counted at least 6 riders. In the lead was a figure who sat on his horse like he was sitting on a throne. Colonel Ezekiel Earl Whitmore. Even from a distance, you could feel the arrogance coming off him in waves. I stood on my porch, my Winchester rifle held loose in my hands. It felt familiar, too familiar. The rider stopped at the edge of my yard. "Thomas Halbrook." Whitmore's voice cut through the night. It was a rich, educated voice, the kind that was used to giving orders and being obeyed. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you, Whitmore," I said, my voice flat. His men chuckled. Whitmore didn't. "My wife, Halbrook, her tracks lead directly to your door. Send her out now, and we can avoid any unpleasantness." "No wife of yours here," I repeated. "Just me." He smiled then, a cold, thin smile that never touched his eyes. "The girl has been unwell, Marshal. Mentally unbalanced. She's prone to fantasies." It was an old trick. Discredit the victim. Paint them as crazy. I'd seen it 100 times. Before I could answer, the door behind me creaked open. It was Clara. She was wearing one of my late wife's dresses, and it hung on her thin frame like a shroud. But her chin was up. Her eyes were burning. "I'm not your wife, Earl," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "And I'm not unwell. I know what I saw. I saw the papers in your study, the letters, the plans. I know about the Redemption League." The name hung in the night air like a death sentence. Whitmore's smile vanished. The mask of the gentleman rancher fell away, and for a second I saw the monster underneath. It was a look of pure, cold rage. "You are making a grave mistake, Halbrook," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't Washington. Your federal badge means nothing here. This is my territory, and you have just declared war." He didn't wait for a reply. He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his pack of wolves following him into the darkness. Clara swayed beside me, the sudden burst of courage leaving her drained. "He meant it," she whispered. "He'll be back." "I know," I said, guiding her back inside, "and we'll be ready." But as I barred the door and checked my rifle, a cold thought settled in my gut. This wasn't a fight I could win. Whitmore had money, men, and influence. I had a wounded girl, a lonely ranch, and a collection of ghosts. The war had come home, and I was hopelessly outgunned. The next morning the world felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm breaks. Clara and I sat at my small kitchen table. She looked better, a little color in her cheeks, but the fear was still there, swimming in her eyes. "He's not just trying to get me back," she said, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. "He's afraid of what I know. The papers I saw in his study, they were lists of names, judges, sheriffs, politicians, all across the territory, all on his payroll. It was worse than I thought. This wasn't just a group of disgruntled ex-Confederates talking big in a back room. This was an organized conspiracy, a shadow government. They're planning something," she continued, her voice dropping. "Something big. He calls it the Great Reversal. They've been stockpiling weapons, military rifles, ammunition, even cannons. Cannons!" My blood ran cold. You don't buy cannons to hunt deer. You buy cannons to fight armies. These men weren't just planning to influence elections. They were planning to restart the Civil War. Before I could process the sheer madness of it, we heard hoofbeats. Not an army this time. A single rider. It was Joseph Miller, the man who delivered my mail once a week. Joseph was a good man, a former slave my unit had freed during the war. We'd found a quiet friendship out here in the Montana wilderness, two old soldiers from different sides of a forgotten battle. He took one look at Clara's bruised face and the rifle in my hand, and his own face grew grim. "Trouble in town, Tom," he said, dismounting. "Whitmore's put a bounty out. $500 for the return of his kidnapped wife." $500. In this territory, that was a fortune. Enough to make an honest man turn crooked and a crooked man turn deadly. "That's not all," Joseph said, his eyes grave. "He's hired outside guns, professionals. I saw them myself. One of them, I recognized him. A man named Wade Dawson." The name hit me like a physical blow. Wade Dawson. He'd been a marshal, same as me, until I testified at the hearing that got him stripped of his badge for bribery and beating a prisoner to death. Dawson was a man who held a grudge like a religion, and he was here, working for Whitmore. This wasn't random. This was personal. And then, as if to prove the point, a rifle cracked from the tree line. The bullet kicked up dirt not 5 feet from where Clara was standing. "Get down!" I yelled, shoving her toward the cover of a water trough. Another shot splintered the porch railing. I saw movement in the trees, at least 3 of them. They were professionals using the terrain, trying to box us in. Joseph scrambled for the barn as bullets chewed up the ground around his feet. Clara was pressed flat against the trough, her face pale, the revolver I'd given her clutched in her hands. A voice called out from the trees, a voice I hadn't heard in 8 years but would never forget. "Halbrook, send out the girl and I might let you live to see another sunset." It was Dawson. Of course, it was Dawson. Whitmore hadn't just hired a gunman. He'd hired my own personal demon. I knew in that moment we couldn't stay. My ranch wasn't a fortress. It was a cage. And the hunters were closing in. They were trying to pin us down, laying down a steady, professional fire. Bullets thudded into the log walls of my house, into the water trough, everywhere. We were trapped. "I'm going to lay down covering fire," I told Clara, my voice tight. "When I do, you run for the house. Don't look back. Just run." She nodded, her eyes wide but determined. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor. I took a deep breath, rose up from behind the trough, and emptied my Winchester into the tree line. The roar of the rifle was deafening. "Now!" I screamed. Clara sprinted. She ran like her life depended on it, because it did. I was right behind her, reloading as I ran, feeling naked and exposed in the open yard. That's when the shot came from a new direction. The ridge to the east, a 4th shooter. It felt like being punched by a giant. The force spun me half around, and a hot, searing pain exploded in my left shoulder. I hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of me. Clara reached the porch and turned. Her face was a mask of horror when she saw me go down. But she didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She raised the revolver I had given her and fired toward the ridge. The shot went wide, but it was enough. The shooter on the ridge ducked back. That split second was all I needed. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the fire in my shoulder, and lunged the last few feet to the porch. Clara grabbed me, pulling me inside as we slammed the heavy oak door and dropped the bar. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, the world swimming in a haze of pain. Blood was already soaking through my shirt. "They have the house surrounded," I grunted, moving to a window. "What do we do?" Clara asked, her voice trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. Then a new voice called out. This one from the barn, Dawson's voice. "Halbrook, I've got your friend here. The mailman." A grunt of pain followed. It was Joseph. They had him. "Let him go, Dawson," I yelled. "He's not a part of this." "Oh, he is now." Dawson's cruel laugh echoed across the yard. "I'm sending him with a message for the sheriff in Redemption Creek. You've got about 3 hours before this whole place is crawling with official lawmen. My offer stands, Halbrook. The girl for your life." I looked at Clara. Her face was set like stone. She shook her head. We both knew it was a lie. Whitmore wanted us both dead. But Dawson's taunt gave me an idea. A desperate, insane idea. There was a cellar under the house. A tunnel I had dug years ago that came out in the ravine behind the ridge. An escape route. A marshal's insurance policy. We're not going to wait for the sheriff, I told Clara, tearing a strip from my shirt to make a crude bandage for my shoulder. We're going to give them a distraction they can't ignore. I looked toward the woodshed, full of dry timber and kerosene. How do you feel about burning my life's work to the ground? The flames from the woodshed lit up the night sky. It was a beautiful, terrible sight. Everything I owned, everything I'd built, going up in smoke. But it worked. Dawson and his men were so focused on the fire, thinking we were trapped in the house, that they didn't see us slip out the tunnel and into the ravine. We stole 2 of their horses and rode. We rode all night, pushing east, away from Redemption Creek, away from Whitmore's influence. The pain in my shoulder was a constant, grinding agony. I was losing blood, fading in and out of consciousness. More than once, Clara had to hold me in the saddle. The girl was saving my life for the second time in as many days. By dawn, we were swaying in our saddles, half dead from exhaustion. But on the horizon, we saw it, a small collection of buildings huddled against the wilderness. The town of Elk Fork. It wasn't much, but it was our only hope. We rode down the single main street, drawing stares from the few people who were awake. We must have looked like ghosts. Me slumped over my horse, my shirt stiff with dried blood. Clara bruised and grim-faced, her eyes scanning every shadow. There was one building that looked promising, a 2-story clapboard with a sign that read, Dr. R. Morgan. Here, I grunted, sliding from my horse. We start here. The door opened before we even knocked. A woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and gray-streaked hair, pulled back in a severe bun, stood there. Her gaze took in my shoulder, then Clara's face, and her expression was one of professional calm, not surprise. Thomas Halbrook, she said, her voice dry. I see trouble still follows you like a stray dog. Rebecca, I managed. We need help. You always need help, Tom, she said. But she stepped aside, ushering us into a clean, sparse office. She flipped the sign on the door from open to closed. Sit down before you fall down, both of you. As she started to work on my shoulder, her hands quick and efficient, I told her everything. Clara's escape, Whitmore's visit, the attack by Dawson, the conspiracy. Rebecca listened without interruption, her expression growing more and more grim. When I was done, she finished stitching my wound and turned to Clara. The Redemption League, she said, and it wasn't a question. I've heard whispers. My late husband, he was a surgeon in the Union Army. He tracked groups like this during the war. Secret societies, die-hard Confederates who refused to accept defeat. I thought they had faded away. They didn't, Clara said quietly. They just went underground. We need to get a telegram to the U.S. Marshal's office in Helena, I said, to William Cooper. He's the chief marshal now. He'll listen to me. Just then, a heavy knock rattled the door. Dr. Morgan, it's Sheriff Whitby. Open up. Rebecca looked at me, her eyes asking a question. I didn't know this sheriff. If he was like the law in Redemption Creek, we were as good as dead. We were trapped. Let me handle this, Rebecca said, her voice low. She opened the door. Sheriff Marcus Whitby was a stocky, barrel-chested man with a weary face and a heavy mustache. He wasn't one of Whitmore's slick, well-dressed cronies. He looked like a man who did his own dirty work. His eyes immediately found me and Clara. Got a wire from Redemption Creek this morning, Halbrook, he said, his voice a low rumble. Says you're wanted for kidnapping and assault. His gaze fell on Clara. This the young lady? I wasn't kidnapped, Clara said, her voice surprisingly strong. I escaped. From Colonel Whitmore. He's been holding me prisoner for 2 years. He did this to me, she said, gesturing to her bruised face. Sheriff Whitby looked from her face to my bandaged shoulder, then to Dr. Morgan. Doctor, your professional opinion? Sustained physical abuse, Rebecca said, her tone clinical and cold as ice. And Mr. Halbrook has a fresh bullet wound. It seems to me they were the ones who were assaulted. The sheriff was silent for a long moment, stroking his mustache. He looked like a man weighing 2 very heavy stones, trying to decide which one would sink him faster. I could see the conflict in his eyes. Uphold the law and face the wrath of the most powerful man in the territory, or look the other way. Finally, he sighed. Colonel Whitmore is a powerful man, he said, But this is my town. I'm not handing anyone over until I get some straight answers. He looked at me. You've got 24 hours, Halbrook. 24 hours to convince me you're not the criminal here, and to convince me this isn't a fight that's going to burn my town to the ground. The clock was ticking. We had a day to stop a private army and a conspiracy that reached across the country, and all we had was the word of a battered girl and a broken-down ex-marshal. The odds weren't just bad. They were impossible. We were living on borrowed time. Every tick of the clock in Rebecca's office felt like a hammer blow. Rebecca sent the telegram to Marshal Cooper and Helena herself, wording it carefully to convey the urgency without giving away too much. Now all we could do was wait and pray. That night, as I lay on a cot, the pain in my shoulder a dull, throbbing fire, Clara told Rebecca the rest of the story. Not just the abuse, but the other girls, the ones who had caught Whitmore's eye and then just disappeared, the whispers among the staff, the unmarked graves she suspected were hidden somewhere on the vast estate, and she told us about the Great Reversal. It wasn't just a political movement, it was a full-blown insurrection in the making. They were planning coordinated attacks on federal armories, planning to use the chaos to carve out their own empire in the West. Whitmore wasn't just a monster, he was a traitor, plotting a second American Civil War. Just as the sun began to set, a deputy from Sheriff Whitby's office brought us a message. It was a reply to a wire the sheriff had sent to his counterpart in Redemption Creek. The message was simple. Halbrook is a known agitator with a grudge against former Confederate officers. The woman, Clara Wilson, has a documented history of mental instability. They are considered armed and extremely dangerous. Full cooperation is expected. It was signed by Sheriff Collins of Redemption Creek, one of the names on Whitmore's payroll. He's boxed us in, Whitby said, his face grim as he stood in Rebecca's office. He's used the law itself to brand you as outlaws. Officially, I should be arresting you right now. But you're not, I said. It wasn't a question. No, Whitby said, shaking his head. I've been the law in this town for 15 years. I know the smell of a lie, and this whole situation stinks to high heaven. But before we could make a new plan, we heard it. The sound of dozens of horses entering the town not with a gallop, but with the slow, deliberate pace of an occupying army. I looked out the window. It was Whitmore, and he'd brought his entire force, at least 30 riders, all of them armed with rifles. They weren't coming for a discussion. They were coming for a war. Sheriff Whitby and his 5 deputies set up a makeshift barricade at the end of Main Street. It was a brave gesture, but a foolish one. 6 men against 30. Whitmore rode forward, a sneer on his face. Sheriff, he called out, his voice dripping with mock respect. I am here on official business to retrieve my stolen property and apprehend a dangerous fugitive. Your business isn't welcome here, Colonel, Whitby yelled back, and neither are your guns. Disperse your men. Whitmore laughed, a cold, ugly sound. This town is now under my protection, Sheriff, until the fugitives are turned over. And then Clara did something I never would have expected. She walked out of Rebecca's office and stood in the middle of the street, unarmed, alone. I'm not a fugitive, Earl, she called out, her voice ringing with a strength I hadn't heard before. I'm a witness. I'm a witness to your crimes, to the murder of Moses, to your treason against the United States government. A murmur went through Whitmore's men. They were hired guns, not fanatics. Treason was a word that got men hanged. Clara took another step forward. And I have proof. The documents from your study, the lists of bribes, the letters from your co-conspirators. I have copies of everything. It was a brilliant, breathtaking bluff. I saw a flicker of doubt, of genuine fear in Whitmore's eyes. He didn't know if she was telling the truth. And that uncertainty was a weapon, but it was a weapon that cut both ways. Seize her! Whitmore roared, his face purple with rage. He couldn't afford to let her live, not if there was even a chance she was telling the truth. And that's when the shooting started. The street erupted into a storm of lead and smoke. I grabbed Clara, pulling her behind a water trough as bullets splintered the buildings around us. Whitby and his men returned fire, but they were hopelessly outgunned. We had to move. The church! Rebecca yelled over the din. There's a hiding place in the basement. We ran. We ran through a nightmare of muzzle flashes, in screaming ricochets. We were halfway across an intersection when a rider blocked our path. It was Wade Dawson. His face was twisted into a triumphant snarl. "End of the line, Halbrook," he sneered and fired. The bullet slammed into my bad shoulder. The pain was blinding. I went down, my revolver flying from my hand. Dawson dismounted, walking toward me, savoring the moment. "Been waiting 8 years for this," he said, cocking his pistol. "The colonel wants you alive, but he'll settle for dead." He aimed his gun at my head. I closed my eyes. Then I heard another shot. I opened my eyes. Dawson was staggering backward, a look of utter shock on his face. He crumpled to the ground. Standing behind him, my revolver in her hands, was Clara. Smoke was still curling from the barrel. She had saved my life. Again. But the battle for Elk Fork had just begun, and the odds had just gotten worse. We made it to the church basement. It was a cold, damp space that smelled of earth and history. It had been a station on the Underground Railroad, a place where people fleeing monsters had hidden in the dark. Now it was our turn. Rebecca dug the second bullet out of my shoulder by the light of a single lantern. The pain was unimaginable. I was fading fast. Outside, the sounds of the gunfight had died down, replaced by an ominous silence. Pastor Stevens, the church's elderly minister, a man with kind eyes and a will of iron, went to see what was happening. He returned with grim news. Whitmore's men had taken the town. They had Sheriff Whitby and his surviving deputies pinned down in the jailhouse. Elk Fork was an occupied territory. "He's going door to door," the pastor said, his voice heavy, "searching for you." We were trapped. I was badly wounded, and we were hiding in a hole in the ground while a private army tore the town apart looking for us. It was over. We had lost. "No," Clara said, her voice fierce. "It's not over." She looked at me. Wade Dawson. He was Whitmore's right-hand man. He might have been carrying something. Orders, letters. My mind, foggy with pain, latched onto the idea. "His saddlebag," I whispered. Dawson always kept his papers in his saddlebags. It was a long shot, a dying man's prayer. But it was all we had. Pastor Stevens, a man of God, volunteered to become a spy. He slipped out of the church, a shadow in the night, to search for Dawson's horse. He was gone for what felt like an eternity. Every creak of the floorboards above, every distant shout, made us jump. Finally, the basement door opened. Stevens was back, and in his hands he carried a pair of worn leather saddlebags. My hands shook as I opened them. Inside, beneath a flask and some spare ammunition, was a packet of letters tied with a string. They were from Whitmore. Instructions for Dawson, orders to hunt us down. But there was more, so much more. There was a letter detailing a plan to permanently resolve a territorial judge who was causing Whitmore problems. Another detailed payments to Sheriff Collins and a dozen other officials. It was the conspiracy, laid out in black and white. It was the proof we needed. And then Clara found the last letter. She read it, and a small, strangled sound escaped her lips. Her face went white as a sheet. "My father," she whispered. "He didn't die of consumption." She handed me the letter. It was an order from Whitmore to Dawson, an order to poison Clara's father, to make it look like a natural death. The man had tried to back out of his deal with Whitmore, tried to get Clara away, so Whitmore had him murdered. Clara didn't cry. She just stood there, the letter trembling in her hand, and I saw something change in her eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by something harder, colder. The kind of resolve I'd only ever seen in soldiers on the eve of a battle they knew they couldn't survive. "We have the proof," Rebecca said, her voice a tense whisper. "But we're still trapped. It does us no good if we're all dead." "The tunnel," Pastor Stevens said, "the one the slaves used. It comes out at the creek, a mile from town. Someone could take the letters and ride for Helena. It was a suicide mission. Whitmore's men would be patrolling the entire area." "I'll go," Rebecca said immediately. She was a doctor, not a fighter, but she was as brave as any soldier I'd ever known. We made copies of the most important letters, a desperate insurance policy. Then, under the cover of the deepest darkness, Rebecca slipped into the tunnel, carrying our only hope with her. Now all we could do was wait. Wait for help that was 2 days away. or wait for Whitmore's men to kick down the door. I didn't know which would come first. The sun rose on a town under siege. Whitmore knew we were still somewhere in Elk Fork. His men were everywhere, their rifles a constant, menacing presence. The townspeople were terrified, locked in their homes. Then came the ultimatum. A rider with a white flag delivered the message to Pastor Stevens. Whitmore had Sheriff Whitby. He would execute him and one townsperson every hour after that, until Clara and I surrendered. He gave us until noon. The weight of it was crushing. Innocent lives were on the line because of us. We have to give ourselves up, Clara said, her voice flat. No, I said, struggling to sit up. That's what he wants. He'll kill us, and then he'll kill Whitby anyway, just to make a point. Tyrants don't keep bargains. Then what do we do? She asked, her voice cracking with despair. We can't let those people die for us. My mind was racing, trying to find a way out, a third option that didn't exist. My shoulder was on fire, my body was weak, but my brain, honed by 20 years of chasing monsters, was searching for an angle. We were out of time. Noon was minutes away. We could hear Whitmore's men gathering in the town square. We could hear the fear of the people huddled in the church above us. This was it, the end of the line. And then, just as all hope seemed to fade, the church doors above us burst open. We heard heavy boots on the sanctuary floor. Shouts, not from Whitmore's men. These were different, disciplined, authoritative. Pastor Stevens went to the top of the stairs. He looked down at us, his old face lit with a miracle. Tom, he said, his voice choked with emotion, you need to see this. With Clara's help, I climbed the stairs. The church was filled with men wearing the badges of United States Marshals. And at the front, standing tall and solid as a mountain, was a man I hadn't seen in 6 years. A man I thought I'd never see again. Chief Marshal William Cooper. He looked older, his hair completely silver, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, intelligent, and unyielding. Hal Brooke, he grunted, a rare small smile on his face. You look like hell. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. Cooper, I breathed. How? Rebecca Morgan found us on the road, he said. We were already on our way. Your telegram got through. We rode all night. He looked at Clara, his expression softening. She told us everything, and she gave us the letters. Help hadn't been 2 days away. It had been just over the horizon. Whitmore and his men? I asked. We caught his patrols completely by surprise, Cooper said, his voice turning to steel. Most of them surrendered. But Whitmore, he's holed up in the hotel with about 10 of his most loyal men. He's barricaded himself in. It's a standoff, I said. Not for long, Cooper replied grimly. He's been given a deadline to surrender, noon. If he doesn't, we're going in. It was 5 minutes to noon. The final battle was about to begin. But this time, we weren't alone. This time, the full weight of the United States government was on our side. The odds had finally turned. Cooper wanted a frontal assault. Kick in the door, a wave of federal marshals. It was his style, direct, overwhelming. But I knew Whitmore. He would be expecting it. He would have the doors and windows covered. Men would die. Good men. There's another way, I told Cooper, a back way. Pastor Stevens told him about the old cellars, the tunnels that connected the buildings under Main Street, a relic from a time of secrets and smuggling. Cooper was skeptical, but he trusted me. He agreed to let me, along with Clara, try to get inside the hotel while he created a diversion at the front. Clara insisted on coming. I started this, she said, her voice firm. I need to see it end. I looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, and I couldn't say no. This was her fight as much as it was mine. We moved through the musty, dark tunnels, the air thick with the ghosts of the past. Above us, we could hear the marshals taking up their positions. We could hear Cooper on a bullhorn, his voice booming through the town. Ezekiel Whitmore, this is the United States government. You have 60 seconds to lay down your arms. We found the entrance to the hotel cellar, a heavy wooden door. With my one good shoulder, I put my weight against it. It groaned, then splintered, and we were in. We moved up the stairs silent as wraiths, emerging in a storage room behind the kitchen. The hotel was an armed camp. Whitmore's men had turned the dining room into a fortress of overturned tables and mattresses. And there he was, Whitmore, pacing behind the barricade like a caged animal. He was shouting at his men, his fine suit rumpled, his face slick with sweat. The aristocrat was gone. Only the cornered monster remained. "They're bluffing!" he screamed. "They won't risk a full assault." "30 seconds, Whitmore," Cooper's voice echoed. That's when I stepped out from the shadows. "They aren't bluffing, Colonel," I said. Every rifle in the room swung toward me. Whitmore stared, his jaw dropping in disbelief. "Halbrook, how—" "It's over," I said, my revolver steady in my hand. "Your men outside have surrendered. Your conspiracy is exposed. Give up." "Never," he snarled. Then Clara stepped out beside me. The sight of her seemed to shake him more than the sight of me. His men wavered. They were hired guns, not revolutionaries. They looked at each other, then at the barricaded windows. They could hear the marshals preparing to storm the building. They were starting to realize they had backed the wrong side. "It's over, Earl," Clara said, her voice cold and clear. "You've lost." "Time's up, Whitmore," came Cooper's final call. And in that moment, Whitmore's mind snapped. With a wild roar, he swung his shotgun, not at me, but at Clara. I lunged, knocking the barrel upward as he fired. The blast tore a hole in the ceiling. I grappled with him, the pain in my shoulder screaming, but he was strong, fueled by pure rage. He threw me off, reaching for a pistol at his belt. But Clara was faster. She raised her revolver. "Drop it, Earl," she said. For a second, he just stared at her. This girl he had considered his property, now holding his life in her hands. Then the front doors of the hotel exploded inward. Cooper and his marshals poured in, a wave of righteous fury. Whitmore's men threw down their guns instantly, their hands shooting into the air. But Whitmore was beyond surrender. With a final defiant scream, he raised his pistol toward Clara. 3 shots rang out as one. From my revolver, from Clara's, and from Cooper's rifle as he stormed into the room. Ezekiel Whitmore staggered back, his eyes wide with surprise, a trio of red blossoms appearing on his chest. He looked down, as if he couldn't believe it. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He crumpled to the floor. The great and powerful colonel finished. Silence fell over the room. It was over. The shooting had stopped. The monster was dead. I looked at Clara. She was trembling, but she was standing tall. She had faced her demon and won. We had won. In the days that followed, the full scope of the Redemption League came to light. The documents Rebecca had carried were the key that unlocked the entire conspiracy. Arrests were made across 3 territories. Senators and judges were implicated. It was a cancer that had been growing in the heart of the country, and we had cut it out. My ranch had been badly damaged, but the people of Elk Fork, led by Pastor Stevens and Sheriff Whitby, helped us rebuild. It was their way of saying thank you. Clara stayed. She had been offered a job by Cooper, a role with the Justice Department helping to track the last remnants of the League. She was smart and brave, and she would have been good at it. But she said she needed time to heal first, time to just be. We worked side by side, rebuilding the fences, repairing the barn, bringing life back to the place that had almost been destroyed. We didn't talk much about what happened. We didn't need to. We had been through the fire together. A bond had been forged, not of romance, but of something deeper. Respect, survival. One evening, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. The same sunset I had watched alone for 6 long years. But now, I wasn't alone. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked quietly. "Men like Whitmore will always exist," I said. "There will always be monsters who crave power, who prey on the weak." I looked at her, at the strength that now shone in her eyes where fear used to be. "But there will also always be people who stand up to them. People like you." She smiled, a real, genuine smile. The past would always be a part of her, a part of us both. The scars would remain. But scars are just a reminder that you were stronger than whatever tried to hurt you. My life of peace had been shattered. But in its place, something new had been built. A second chance. A new purpose. It turns out my story wasn't over after all. It was just beginning. This story is a reminder that even when the world seems darkest, even when you're outgunned and alone, one person standing up for what's right can change everything. It's a reminder that true justice isn't about badges or laws, but about the courage to face down the monsters, wherever you find them. If you were moved by Tom and Clara's fight for justice, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss another story of ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. Thanks for listening.